Hi, Dr. P here to talk about two different kinds of playtesting, quantitative and qualitative. Now, quantitative involves counting using numbers, in other words, statistics. But this misses a lot. As Albert Einstein said, many of the things you can count don't count. Many of the things you can't count really count. It reminds me of the old saying that there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. Now, doing quantitative testing is much easier with video games these days because of the open betas and the pre-release sales of video games. In effect, the new owners of the game are being used as playtesters. You'll rarely get enough tabletop testing to use quantitative methods because the sample space will be too small. In qualitative testing, you're not generally relying on sample spaces, although you do use numbers where they make sense. You're relying on other things. You're trying to take into account those things you cannot count. In other words, you're using what's most important, not what's easy to count. This can make it harder to do qualitative testing well than to do quantitative testing. This is also called usability testing, where even two users is better than guessing. And the guru of usability testing is Jacob Nielsen, and he has a site online, useit.com. The extreme of quantitative testing is use of metrics for video games already in some kind of release, whether it's beta or post-actual release. And from this arises the notion that we don't need game designers to design games. Metrics counts how often specific things happen or don't happen, whether it's player choices or in-game outcomes. Often it uses A-B methods. In other words, half of the people play one way, half play another way, and you see which works better. In the extreme, it can come close to worship of statistics. Now, I have some lengthy comments from a couple of people. First, from John Brieger. This one is half right, because the design process is all about iteration. And I'll interject here, iteration is an ugly word that people use. What it means is trying things out and keep trying variations and so on until you get to where you think is best. My issue, to go back to the quote, my issue is people often approach their game testing as though they are conducting a quantitative study, and each small change represents an experiment against a control of the previous version. I think it's more helpful to approach playtesting using qualitative research techniques, using techniques from usability studies or ethnographic research to base playtest structures on. And I'm of the same opinion. Realistically, you will never have enough tests to statistically finish your tabletop game using a scientific A-B testing method. There's just not enough time for it. It's much easier to get video games playtested because they are digital and can easily be distributed to people to try out. And video games typically don't need people to read a manual to figure out how to play the game. So it's better to make lots of changes at each iteration, each play, during the early parts of the design process to see how the core experience and feeling changes, and then make smaller incremental changes toward the end of the testing, in effect polishing and tweaking. The majority of the balancing of your game should likely be mathematical plus a little bit of manual tweaking. If you just essentially use trial and error, which is guess something and then check to see how the guess works out, over and over, you don't have enough real data to conclude your game is balanced. But a game is much more than just balance. It's about how the mechanisms you use combine with the actions of the players to make an impression on the players. You can't count that, nor will user surveys tell you that. You've got to have people play and watch them play. Now, these next two quotes are from Raph Koster, who's very well known for MMO design and also for his book about games. The danger when you get people who don't know game design but do know metrics is that they conclude that they've solved the game design by reducing it to a certain set of metrics. That was actually something which was said to me by someone who was working on Facebook games. We're done. We've solved it. The metrics will tell us what to do. We don't need a designer anymore. It was ignorant, clueless. They met their deserving fate eventually. And I've seen another example reporting when some people said the same thing and they fired all their game designers. Koster again. It's a complicated subject and the real risk is absolutism. Design that ignores all data is going to be poor design because design should be based on what people do and what they want. On the flip side, data that ignores design is just a useless pile of numbers. What about questionnaires? While I like to do surveys in general, I don't present a questionnaire to players after a test, one that can make people feel uneasy and possibly not even playtest the game because they know they're going to have to deal with a questionnaire. Instead, I watch what people do and say during the play. Now, you can't rely on questionnaire results because, among other things, people can be nice. It is possible to have discussions with people and ask them to put on different colored hats, take different points of view that free them up so that they'll say things that are not entirely positive. But mostly I watch what people do and say during play. And I often have playtesters who I know, so I know what their propensities and preferences are, and that also can tell me something about what's happening. Even if you can do metrics, you need to do qualitative testing as well, because there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. Thanks for listening.